Hello, this is Sid, and you're listening to The Economic Story. In the construct of a market, there are a few critical elements that play a crucial role. They are information, currency, value, and property rights. In this episode, I want to review these elements and the role they play in markets. These elements are so critical to the market that a market may find it either very difficult to function or may completely fail in the absence of these elements. Now let's review each of these one at a time. Information. Buyers and sellers use information to learn about the market, the other party, the product, price history, price forecasts, underlying trends, etc., etc. Without information, none of that can happen, thus hindering the transaction. And with asymmetric information, one side might get an uneven advantage, which may either result in a critical or maybe even a non-critical market failure. Now, even if the market failure does not happen in the short run, this scenario could potentially create the context for market failure in the long run. So information is a very important component of a market. Currency. Currency is what is used in transactions within the market in which products and services are bought or sold. The value of a currency typically tends to be much more stable as compared to the value of a product. This creates a conducive environment in which buyers, sellers, and traders becomes easier for them to make decisions in terms of if they wanted to buy something or sell something. By something, I mean product. If the value of currency fluctuated as much as the value of the product, the decision-making process would have been much more complicated because there is going to be a difficult reference point if on one side you don't have something very stable. Anyway, the product or service that is bought or sold may also be referred to as a value item. Value. Ultimately, the product or service that is bought or sold in markets is a representation of what we call is value. This essentially value is exactly what is bought or sold. It's just a bit of an abstraction of what exactly is bought or sold. The concept of value is extremely complicated and it is extremely important one as well. Thus, it needs its own, you can call it episode, chapter, essay, whatever, to really go in depth of understanding this concept. So for now, I'll not go into full depth of this topic, but what I will mention is that for transactions to take place in markets, there always needs to be a value differential in the buyer's and the seller's mind. That is what allows the transaction to take place. Otherwise, the transaction cannot take place. The buyer needs to believe that buying an item or he or she can capture more value, while the seller needs to believe that by selling the item, he or she can capture more value, either in the currency or in some other market. So, very important concept, but we have to go in depth with regards to value separately. Property rights. Finally, property rights and the mechanism to transfer those rights allow an ease of transaction execution. Think about it. Having the need to physically transfer millions of barrels of crude oil would have been much more complicated as compared to transfer of the ownership rights. Thus, this whole thing makes transactions much more viable and thus cheaper. The topic of property rights, again, is much more complicated and involved topic. So it should be definitely taken up in a separate chapter or session or episode to go in depth. In fact, all of these four topics need their own sessions or chapters. So consider this more of an intro of the critical elements that play a very major role within the market. but each have to be explored independently.